From Social Prosperity Partners, this is Community Catalysts.
Sometimes it's a hammer, sometimes it's a feather. The hammer is my personality. I'm very outgoing. People say I'm a strong personality. I don't disagree with them, but there are times when that doesn't get the job done.
Welcome to Community Catalysts. I'm your host, Matt Lehrman. Strong communities don't just happen. They depend on people willing to lead with courage, humility, and genuine care for others. Some are elected, others are appointed, hired, or step forward through activism and service. However they arrive, every leader is shaped by the challenges they face and the lessons they learn along the way. That's what this podcast is all about, real conversations with people who know both the weight and the reward of local leadership. My hope is that by sharing their stories, we can all feel more connected, better prepared, and more inspired to lead in the places we call home. My guest today is Mayor Bill Danielson of Irmo, South Carolina. A businessman for more than 35 years, he was elected mayor in 2023 and entered public service with a clear-eyed view of the fact that Irmo, a town of 12,000 people, collects no property tax. So without that conventional revenue stream, the town's ability to thrive depends on the strength of its partnerships and the leadership of its business community. I've been especially looking forward to exploring how the mayor brings a business leader's mindset to the responsibilities and challenges of civic leadership. Mayor Bill Danielson, welcome to Community Catalysts.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Mayor, Irmo is unusual, I think, in South Carolina in that it doesn't collect a property tax. How did that come about, and what are the advantages and disadvantages of that choice?
That's a great question. I do not know the time and date that it did come about. I know it's been decades ago. I've been living in and around the Irmo area for close to 40 years. And there's never been a property tax. So the bigger issue is when prior government decided to eliminate what tax they had, went to zero. Now we can't raise it. That's all a legislative issue that has to go way beyond us. It has to go to the State House. They do have a bill in place that they're talking about for those municipalities that have a zero millage and that don't have a property tax. They're bandying about this bill, but about allowing them to institute it. But they've added an amendment to it that says it's going to go to the voters first. Well, that kills that.
What are the revenue streams that you can depend on?
We basically depend on the businesses, small business, large business licenses, building permits, building fees, inspection fees. We do get accommodations tax. We do get hospitality taxes. We instituted that about 5 years ago, which certainly helps with some of the fluff items, providing the services to the folks that, it's not road work. It's not anything big, but it's about bringing tourism into the area. It's about improving parks, improving those types of the things we all live with, which make people happy in Irmo, make Irmo a great place to live. There is, we do get some franchise fees from power, cable, electric, that type of thing. But yeah, there are no taxpayers in Irmo that pay money to the town of Irmo unless you're a business.
Are there sales taxes that are coming to the town at all, or is everything kind of these transactional fees that are coming through?
Everything is transactional. That's correct. And the sales tax goes right to the state.
Wow. Tell us about the town of Irmo itself. What makes it distinct?
Well, Irmo being, we're a suburb of Columbia. They say it's 10 miles, but, I can get in my car and drive you to the border and not leave the town, right? So it abuts downtown. It's about 10 miles from downtown Columbia, but from Columbia itself, it borders right up to Irmo. It is just a quaint, nice place to live. We're only about a little less than 9 square miles, and it's not square. It's anything but square. Town limits are going off. They look like something out of the Alien movie, right? There's fingers here and strips there. It is very complicated as to who lives in the town, who's not in the town. People swear they live in the town, but they don't live in the town because they have an Irmo mailing address. And that even complicates it more. But Irmo is about the community. And when I talk to folks, I consider the area Irmo. There's a sense of community that goes beyond just the town of Irmo.
You're saying there's a community spirit that isn't confined by the geographic distinction.
Yes. And I would say that number of people is probably close to 20,000 in total, but it's significant. It's a significant number of folks.
Talk about the growth a little bit. Can you kind of set the context for us about what growth in your community looks like?
Yeah. And this is going to sound very strange. The population of Irmo has not changed since the mid-90s. There were 11,500 people in the town of Irmo in 1995, 1997, somewhere in that time frame. There is just at 12,000 people in Irmo right now. So people say you haven't grown. Well, we have grown. And the reason we have grown is geographically. We have annexed. We have people that have come into us and wanted border properties to come into the town because we're easier to work with in their mind than the two counties. And we're also unique in that we sit in two different counties. The town of Irmo is divided between Richland County and Lexington County. So we have three government entities within that 9 square miles. Which one takes precedent, which is the town of Irmo local, and then Richland and Lexington County. So the folks, a lot of them want to deal with Irmo because we're pro-business, not that they're not, but we are very specific in what we do and how we do it. So that's really where the growth is. And our corridors now are growing. It's like wildfire. We're getting a lot of the national restaurants. I wish we'd get more locals. But our roads are getting congested.
Mayor, while we were preparing to have our discussion today, you told me that you never really thought of yourself as a politician and that you stepped into public service because you wanted to see your community thrive. And so I'm really curious to ask you, what about Irmo wasn't thriving previously, or maybe the other way, which is, what is your vision of a thriving Irmo?
That's a great question, and I won't shy away from it. The reality is I was urged to run for council back 6 years ago. I was urged because of the basic way the town operated from a governmental standpoint. We have basically a council manager form of government, right? So I'm not the final call. The council, it's a 5-member council, 3 votes wins. And we've historically had a lot of uncomfortable banter. We had been a lot of negativity coming off the dais. So when I could see how that happens because a few years ago I said something, that I shouldn't have said on the dais, and I said that's really not going to happen again. I'm going to try for that not to happen. And it was because I was being, challenged in a way that politics will do, and I wanted to quiet that down. I wanted people to understand we can do this, we can run this town without being at each other's throats. And I think that's what prompted me originally. And the odd story is that I was asked to run by the mayor that I ultimately defeated when I was elected mayor. Kind of odd, right? That ended up working that way.
When you say a lifetime of public service, what all does that encompass?
That encompasses serving on many, many charitable organizations. One of them was, some of them are not, some of them are service. For instance, I became very active in special needs community because of my business acumen. I was asked to be on one of the local providers of special needs on their board, served 8 years. Year or two after that, They were looking for a person to get on to be appointed by the governor to get on the disability board of directors. And they came to me, they mentioned me. I said, I'd be glad to do it. And I ended up being appointed by former Governor Nikki Haley to the Department of Disability and Special Needs. And one of 9 commission members. Very governmental, very public, very, very political, which I did not know at the time. So took a lot of bullets, ended up within, I don't want to say a year of being on that commission, I ended up being elected chairman. How does that happen? I don't know. I can't answer that question, but it does. And it did. So those are the kind of things.
Mayor, I'm curious, the years spent and the time and effort spent working in nonprofit organizations and on community causes, that demonstrates a significant level of caring and a commitment to community. If you were going to write, 1 or 2 lessons that you took from all of that experience that have helped you as an elected leader, what would you point to? What are the skills that you learned in all of that nonprofit service that actually help you be a more effective leader on the dais?
The first thing that I always did was listen, hone your listening skills, and sit back and learn about what you don't know. Right? You may be the greatest businessman in the world. You may have the most money to be the most philanthropic person in the world, but that doesn't mean you know how that particular organization runs and operates. And then stay in your lane. Focus on what needs to be done. If you're so new at something, you don't have the authority, the knowledge, or the respect of others to come in and make great change. You've got to understand where you sit and how those folks got there. And I'll give you an example. When I sat on that board, there were probably of the 35 board members, this was 20 years ago, I would say that half of them were my age now or older and had family members that were being served by that organization. They couldn't make change. We could see where we were bleeding to death, right? You could see the programs that were bleeding to death, but they could not make change. And after listening and being patient and gaining their respect, I said, folks, I became the treasurer, and I said, folks, or acting treasurer, don't recall right now, but we're bleeding. We need to give these back to DDSN and Department of Disability Special Needs. So when I did that, they realized it was for the betterment of all. Right? We can't provide for anybody if we're gone. So you gotta really read the room.
Mayor, I love the insights that you just shared, but I want to put some context to this because, again, as we were preparing for today, you described yourself in the business world, and this is your quote, you describe yourself as a hammer guy, someone who pushes hard to get things done. And so I want to make sure I'm hearing you right. In business, you were the hammer guy. What you learned in the nonprofit sector was to be what? To be softer, to be more agile? How do you explain the skills that you acquired from there?
Well, it's, again, really good question, because I describe myself that way because that's how a lot of people see me, right? Because they see me in the business world. When there's something to get done, I am going to make sure it gets done. I'm going to hammer on whatever, and I mean that in a positive way, that I'm going to push to get whatever needs to get done. But there are things you can't do. There are things as mayor I can't do even if I want to do, and I need to work politically with other leaders in the state. I got to work politically with the city of Columbia. Just had lunch with the mayor of Columbia last week. We had our quarterly mayor's luncheon. So, you've got to have relationships. So that's where I've learned to soft pedal things. And it's taken me a long time to get to the point where I can do it I can change tack. So yeah, I can't be the Titanic. I got to be able to move around and agile is a good word that you used. You got to use whatever skill you've learned in that particular case to get the job done. Sometimes it's a hammer, sometimes it's a feather. But the hammer is my personality. I'm very outgoing. People say I'm a strong personality. I don't disagree with them. But there are times when that doesn't get the job done. And I find myself, we all know the term blowing smoke, right? I find myself not blowing smoke, but you're going to get more with honey than you are with a battering ram, right? It's just how you have to deal with situations.
This is a lesson a lot of people who take elected office, they have to learn on the job. They don't learn this in business or in other fields, that it's the quality of relationships that you create with other leaders, either not just within your council, but in other governmental organizations as well, that it's the quality of the relationship, the ability to have a meaningful conversation and say, this is what we're trying to do. How can we work together? Where do our needs align? That's something that elected leaders have to be able to learn on the job.
They do. And depending on the case, there are some times that being the hammer and pushing back is the appropriate response. And I've had that happen. We've had that happen with one of our counties here. And we waited it out. We pushed back. We were angry. They tried to step on our home rule, tried to tell us how we can zone. Every insulting thing you could come up with from a county trying to push onto a municipality happened. So we just waited for that election and wrote it out, because we knew politically that body would change. And now we have a great relationship, because the majority is not the majority in that body. And those listening to me will know what I'm talking about.
Mayor, I want to talk about an area where I know you've taken initiative, and I'm curious whether it was more hammer or more of your soft skills. But I understand that you took the leadership on a project to address food insecurity in your community. Can I ask you to talk about that?
Yeah, we are a very prosperous town, right? We have, our median income is higher than most of the averages around us, but that doesn't tell you the whole picture. The bigger picture is we have a community that is in need. We have a lot of childhood hunger. We have a majority, I don't know the number, I hear it's 70%, maybe higher, of our school kids are on the free lunch program. Some get breakfast. I mean, some of them, it's the best meal in the day that they get. Never mind the seniors that we're dealing with also, who are on very tight budgets. So we have a lot of great charities in the area, and that is really, really good. But one of my strengths, Matt, has always been to raise money, right? When you're on the board of directors of an organization, what's your number one goal? It's to raise money, right? It's to make governing decisions, not in the weeds decisions, governing decisions, guide that entity and raise money if you need to. And I've always been pretty good at that. So a successful businessman here in this town come to me and say, I want to give money. I don't know who to give it to. I want to feed the people who need it. I'm going to the grocery stores. I end up paying for some people's food. I see it happening. I see them struggling. And I want to give you money. I said, well, you can't give me money. We got to figure out a way to make this work. So I decided that, well, heck, he wants to give money. He wants to challenge some of his competitors and other folks in that real estate industry to step up and help the mayor start this initiative and bridge the gap, right? So I said, okay, I'll do it, but you're going to lead it money-wise. And he said, I'll lead it money-wise if you lead it personality-wise, and you're in charge because you're the mayor. And I said, well, I don't know that that's that important if we got the right people. So we decided to do it, and we did it. So we partnered with the Irmo Community Police Foundation, which has been a foundation in existence for a long time. And that's one of their goals: feed kids that need it, feed senior citizens, shop with a cop around the holidays. They know how to vet them. They know who truly needs it, who's not going to try to scam us, those types of things. And we're with them when they spend the money. It's not like we give them a blank check. All right. I mean, we're literally with them in Walmart, Costco, whatever it might be, paying their rent. We write it to the landlord, those types of things if they need help. So I met with those folks and said, listen, I think we're going to blow up your bank account. Are you ready for this? And they said, we're ready. Well, we did just that. We raised over $70,000 in about 2 months' time. And it's funny that you asked me about, was that with the hammer or the soft touch? It was mostly soft touch, but it was soft touch of the right people, right? It was soft, tough. And I try to explain this to a lot of folks, and they don't understand it. Maybe they hadn't been, and you asked me about my job. What I've done for years, though, is develop some real estate, build buildings. I've always been around the real estate industry prior to the payroll, and I still do some of that. But it's about leveraging your assets. And either A, people don't know how to do it, or they don't want to do it, or they have no assets to leverage, which seems odd to me, because why would you be elected to council if you have no assets to leverage, right? That's the businessman thinking. That's the economic driver that you see me coming from. And it's the thriving, right? We cannot thrive. If you're a small town and you're not growing, you're dying, especially one that relies on businesses, because they close every day. So,
right.
The reality is most of those folks are people who want to do business in the town or have done business in the town, and or that I've had relationships with over 35 years, where I just basically picked up the phone. I said, hey, I need your help. And this is about hunger. This is about the truly needy people in our community. And I can show you example after example after example of that. And these people that I called initially are all of means. They all have the economic means to do it. And they did it. Some did it more than others, but I never got a no. So it was, in my mind, it was easy. Now, after the first 75 calls, now I got to go a little bit deeper into the Rolodex, to use the old generational term, right? And try to get other folks to do it, and also help this particular nonprofit to get people to donate, go to their webpage and hit the donate button and get the $20 and $30 and $100 at a time, right? I told folks, I'll go get your check if it's $1,000 or more. And, we were fortunate. I had, the gentleman I mentioned, he put in $11,000.
Mayor, there's one last area I want to ask you about, because so far we've been talking about how you have made connections and exercised your relationships throughout your community to move things forward. And it's an activist way of using your position as mayor. I am curious for your thoughts on experiences that a lot of mayors and council members have, where residents come to council meetings and say things that are, not pleasant or incivil or uncivil, are difficult to hear, and maybe misinformation or disinformation, right? There can actually be some malicious purpose behind that. And I'm curious what you've learned about how to deal with the public when they come in, and how you distinguish between what you think of as legitimate criticism and concern that's voiced versus what's not.
Our system that we deal with, and this is why the conferences are so great, because we talk to other mayors and we think we have something difficult, but they have something way more difficult, right?
Right. And we should mention, you and I just met over at the Municipal Association of South Carolina conference in Hilton Head, which was wonderful.
It was wonderful. And I really enjoy that. One of the things, A, educational, talking to folks like yourself, and B, the camaraderie and the relationships with other mayors and other representatives of local governments. So the reality is that We just in the last year and a half put civility signs up on the back behind our dais about absolutely being civil. And we are, when it comes time for them, they can have an opportunity to speak twice during our meeting, once on the agenda items only, and at the end on anything they want. And the problem is when they're really, really active, they're going to ooh and ah and hem and haw and make sounds all during the meeting. And sometimes we've had to say, enough is enough. Let's settle down, because I'll shut this meeting down. I've never had to do that. But it's gotten ugly a few times. And, I basically I want to say it's about a year ago, where people were accusing myself and the council members of being on the take, scamming, skimming, all of the negative things you just alluded to that people, when it comes to, we're in the pockets of the developer. We don't, all of those things. And right to our faces as we sit there. And I had had enough. So I basically said, there'll be no more of this. You'll be asked to leave. I was angry, but I was very controlled. And I had people for weeks and months after telling me how well I handled it. Now, there was the odd and end person who got on Facebook and said I was a butthole or whatever they wanted to say. That's fine. I get it. So you've got to know. The key is knowing when it's coming. You got to know when it's coming. If it's controversial, you're going to kind of gear up and you're going to be ready for that. It's the thing that catches you off guard, right? Which you think is the most simple thing. And it for some reason, it just balloons. But you're right, Matt. It's misinformation, disinformation, and straight out lying, right? It's just straight out lying. So you try to explain it to them. You try to tell them what it's like. And then what I'll say is we don't converse with our constituents in a meeting. It's called presentation by citizens. They can present, they got 3 minutes and there are little lights there and they're out, right? And I explain that to them every time they go up. You got 3 minutes, what's your name, your address, and we let everybody speak, which we don't have to. You can be in the bordering, remember that 20,000 number? You can be in the border of Irmo and come to our meeting and speak. You don't have to be a citizen. Those people usually don't speak to tell us that we're doing a great job, right? But we want to hear them. They are a bona fide part of this community. So we're very strict with that. We ride that. We tell them you got 3 minutes. And if they get out of hand, the police chief and I have an eye contact thing that he'll stop it if it has to stop. That's only happened a couple of times. And nobody's ever been removed. Nobody's ever been asked to be removed. But I've had to get stern with them and say, you will not accuse my council and my town of stealing money that first off, isn't even yours. It's not even their money. We instituted basically a fee per home site for new development, $1,000 fee, right? And so, we only approved that because we were going to get $500,000 of money. Our law dictates that money has to be put back into landscaping infrastructure that we can do with regard to impact on that community where that particular subdivision is. So it's, you deal with it the best you can. And what I say to the folks, lastly, I say, I'll end that meeting and I'll say, listen, if we have to go on an executive session, we come out, I'll say, when we're come out of executive session and we close the meeting, I'll be happy to talk to you outside. 1-to-1, I'll be happy to speak with you. And Matt, 95% of the time they leave. They don't wait. They don't want to have that conversation with me in person because they're not surrounded by the horde. I call them, they're the Frankensteins. They're hunting Frankenstein, right? That's kind of the way it goes. Of course, it's an old time movie. Most people don't know what I'm talking about, but they're coming with torches and pickaxes. So it's okay. You give them the opportunity. You do what you can do.
I really appreciated the insight that you just gave is that the things that you can prepare for are easier to deal with. But getting surprised by an issue leaves you vulnerable, right? And it leaves you vulnerable not just on the substance of the issue, but even on the emotional response to the issue in the moment. And that's a skill that we can talk about and we can think about for the future. That's a very interesting insight right there.
It is. And it's that way in talking to your council members and running a meeting. You sometimes just don't know what they're going to say or do. And my whole preaching to my council is, I don't want any surprises up there. We can agree to disagree. Just stay consistent. And we don't need to have that happen. We just had a 2.5-hour work session last Tuesday. We spent an hour on one subject and we don't all agree. I said, that's fine. So that tells me where you're going to vote come on the 16th of September. I get it, right? Just stay consistent. So, if I think we're not going to be successful, we'll pull it from the agenda. So those are we don't have to be unanimous, right? But it doesn't need to be the War of the Roses up there, to quote another old movie, right? It doesn't have to be the War of the Roses. That's the bigger challenge. The bigger challenge to me is making sure we as a council try to work together and not show the public what they'd seen years prior.
Mayor, one last question before we go. I want you to imagine that you're invited to speak before, I don't know, the Chamber of Commerce or the Rotary, that your audience is filled with people in business in your community or in their own communities, wherever they are, but they never thought about getting involved in their local government. What would you tell business people about why they should run for office and get themselves involved in civic affairs?
I would tell them that they need to be involved because they know how to make things get done. They know how to match. They know how to make payroll. They know how to make tough business decisions. They know how to converse with people over items as simple as buying a pallet of lumber or paper versus putting an intersection together with DOT and having to build a roundabout and all of the things that go with that and discuss all of that. The number one thing, though, is most business people know how to negotiate. And they know how to do it without all the emotion. And they're the ones that can't vote unless they live in that town. I have business members come to me all the time, Bill, when are you going to get us so that we can vote? Because we have businesses in this town. And I said, I agree with you 100%. Again, out of my pay grade, that's a state house issue, right? You got to be a citizen. So the big key is they know how to run a business. They're not big on nonsense. And they understand what a bottom line is and how to balance a balance sheet and what a P&L looks like. Simple, basic stuff. Now, understanding government financials, very different, but it's the same, right? It's just formatted differently and at different names for different entries, but it's all basically the same. The numbers are the numbers. And that's what it's about. You got to understand the numbers. I'll give you one quick example. Sanitation, we do get sanitation fees, but it's in and out, right? And for years, we had a little bit of balance. We had a little money more, and we were able not to raise sanitation fees for 3 years. Then we had to, restructure the contract. Cost post-COVID, costs went up. And we ended up signing a new contract, 3%, whatever the cost of living was, we would go by that, not to exceed X percent, and it goes up every year. So we said, listen, we don't have that excess cash here anymore, right? The law says we have to spend it. We can't keep it. It's a wash. And just like our fire protection is a wash. It's about $1.8 million. It's a wash. So those are the kinds of things that you've got to understand. People are screaming at you, why is it costing me $3 more a month? They got my trash. Well, have you seen the equipment? Do you know what it's like? That garbage truck out there is $750,000. It's now picking it up without a guy, right? So there's positives and negatives, but you gotta you got to understand how to negotiate and make sure you get the right person. In our case, the right city manager, town administrator, who knows how to do that stuff, and who I'm lucky enough to be able to sit side by side in a lot of that stuff with our town administrator.
How to get things done, how to negotiate, how to hold the municipality accountable. These are all skills that come directly from the business experience you've had.
Absolutely.
Mayor Bill Danielson, thank you so much for being open to this conversation. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, good talking to you too. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks again to my guest, Mayor Bill Danielson of Irmo, South Carolina. Listening to the mayor, I'm reminded that community leadership so often begins with people bringing the strengths they already have, whether it's experience from work, lessons from family, or even the challenges they faced and overcome, and then staying open to the new lessons the job inevitably brings. So, dear listeners, let me ask you this question. What strength or life experience do you find yourself leaning on most in your leadership? I'd love to hear your answer. Call me at 602-688-2724 and leave a message. Your insight just might be featured in a future episode. And while you're at it, if you'd be open to sharing your unique journey to leadership, click the podcast guest link in the show notes. Your insights may be exactly what another leader needs to hear. Community Catalysts is edited by Nick Living the Dream Tantillo. Our executive producer is John Little. I'm Matt Lehrman of Social Prosperity Partners. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with another Community Catalyst.